yeah, we haven't done the intros for quite a while, and I think it's we get more information and just skipping all the intro stuff. Yeah. But here we are. We have Sam on the podcast with us for all those listeners. And if you guys don't know, Sam is an absolutely amazing guy. So, but I'm not going to ruin it for all the listeners. I'm just going to let Sam, you have the floor. Why don't you tell all our listeners and all our fans, or millions and millions of fans, to tell everybody who you are.
Well, thank you, Adrian and Brandon, for having me here. I'm really excited just to get to chat with you guys. I'm a natural bodybuilder. Competed, I've done 7 shows, I think. I'm prepping right now. I'm in my fifth prep. It's pre-prep phase, so like the early stages of dieting. I'm also an online physique coach. I work mainly with mainstream lifestyle clients that want to lose fat and build muscle. And that's me. So I'm an online physique coach and I'm really passionate about natural bodybuilding.
That's awesome, man. I didn't realize you've done 7 shows, man.
Yeah.
How many seasons in total have you done so far?
I have so this is my fifth prep, so I guess this is my fifth, it'll lead into my fifth season. My first 3 seasons they're just like single show seasons. My fourth season, so my last one, I did 4 shows. So I knocked out a bunch in a single prep.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, that was a long season for you. I remember following along with it, and it's just I was like, oh man, he's still going.
It was a
He's
marathon.
yeah. When did that one like originally like when was your first show that season, and then when was your last show? Like how many months were you actually like full like in competition mode?
Jeez. So the first show was the WMBF Ontario, which I think was the date that I have in my head was September 9th, 2023. I don't know that date just sticks in my head. I think it was probably such a priority at that time frame that it's just like ingrained in my brain at this point. But I think it was September 9th, 2023. The last show was like November, I want to say 17th or 18th, which was I competed in the amateur world. So it's like, what is that, like 2.5 months? It was like 13 or 14 weeks.
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah, good on you, man. Um, I want to actually bring it back to like even before you started getting into the fitness, before you started getting into bodybuilding, because I loved like for those of you guys listening, I was actually on Sam's podcast a couple of times. He has a great podcast itself, and I was just curious about your background because you dug into mine quite a bit. So I was just curious about what your lifestyle, what your life looked like before you started fitness, before you started bodybuilding. Like if I was a fly on the wall, like what would a typical day look like for you, man?
It would have looked like preteen kid stuff, basically. So I started lifting when I was really, really young. I think I was 12 when I started being really consistent about it. I was really lucky when I grew up. My uncle, who lived very close to my family home, he had a decently equipped home gym, more than enough equipment for a 12-year-old kid to dig into. So I started lifting when I was really, really young, and I got my first gym membership a few years later when I was 15, I think. But yeah, I was pre-lifting era version of me, did kids stuff, hung out with friends, I guess. I was taking piano lessons. I liked video games growing up, like really liked video games. Went to school and I lifted weights, yeah, pretty early on. So I guess, yeah, it would have been just kid stuff more or less.
Nice, man. Yeah, that's super cool. Like that you were getting into it when you mentioned around 12. So yeah, no, that's awesome. Like I wish I would have personally gotten to it at that age. I think I was yeah, like 16, 17 or something like that when I fully got into it. But that's very cool. Was it like barbells or dumbbells? What was like the equipment that you had access to?
They had a dumbbell rack. I think in hindsight, it went to either 50 or 60 pounds. So not super heavy, but when you're 12 years old, that's super, super heavy. So it was more weight than I could handle, that's for sure. So that was more than enough. They had a nice adjustable bench. They had an easy curl bar with like a preacher bench, and they had a universal trainer, which actually had pretty much everything you'd need outside of dumbbells. It had like a lat pull down attachment, different attachments for like cable bicep curls, Bayesian curls, even. Um, they had like a mid-level cable attachment. It had a chest press setup, an overhead press setup. So it had basically everything that I could have possibly needed. There's no barbell outside of the little easy curl bar. But with the cables on the universal gym or the universal trainer and the dumbbells, it was like everything I could have possibly needed. I wasn't good at lifting. I was horrible at it. I was like self-taught, like, and YouTube wasn't a thing yet. So I was like really, really self-taught. I got a couple exercises from my dad here and there. That and I just kind of like fault. They had like a diagram on the wall of like pictures of different exercises, like really old school. Like imagine you go to like a Planet Fitness or something like that, and on all of their pieces of equipment, it has a diagram of how to do the exercise, and it like highlights the muscles that you're supposed to be hitting. I remember they had like a big diagram on their wall that had a whole ton of different exercises that were illustrated with that kind of style of visual, showing the exercise, like what the movement roughly should look like in one or two pictures, with the muscle that's highlighted. So I kind of tried to copy that until a little bit later on when I got my gym membership, which was I think I was 15. I was like in 10th grade, something like that, ninth or 10th grade, 10th grade, I think.
Nice,
But
man.
So what it
Yeah, that's
was,
very
yeah. So how did you, so you were sort of just working out at the home gym for quite a while before you got into an actual gym. So did you have any coaches along the way when you perhaps joined the membership, or was everything just self-taught?
it was, I never had a formal coach. I was mostly self-taught. However, I was pretty influenced by my dad. So he was a big like intrinsic motivator, I suppose. Or I think my intrinsic motivation probably developed from watching my dad as I grew up. He was like, he trained 5 days a week ever since I could remember. To me, it's like you look up to your dad like he's a superhero, basically. That was like how I looked up to him. He had big muscles. I used to like brag to my friends like my dad's got bigger arms than your dad, basically. So he was a big like motivational kind of an influence on me, and he didn't help me a ton with the practical element of lifting weights. We actually, when I got my gym membership, I trained at the same gym as him, but he kind of did his thing, and I went off and did my own thing. But there's another guy that trained at that gym, and I would get there really early. I'd probably arrive at like 6 a.m., which for a high school kid that didn't have to be there, it was pretty early. I was the only kid that was there, and the gym was like it's like a kind of hole in the wall, like gritty bodybuilder gym in the industrial park in the small town that I grew up in. So it was a lot of like blue collar workers around like the steel plant close by and the other industrial area, the other kind of like very physically demanding, tough, laborious jobs that were close by. So there's a lot of those type of lifters that were there, and I was just like some kid. But I remember there's one guy there. His name was Gord, and he was just like a super, super nice dude. To me, he was the most jacked guy I'd ever seen, aside from my dad, of course. And he was super strong. I saw the way that he trained. He was squatting super heavy. In retrospect, I'm not sure if it is as heavy as I would think it is now. But when you're like 15 years old and you're seeing a guy with at least two plates on the bar, you're like, wow. So I don't know how much he was actually lifting, looking back. But to me, he was like Hercules. Um, but the dude was super, super nice. He was really encouraging to me when I was there, like, and I remember the way he used to speak to me too. Like he was very soft spoken. So he's super jacked, but he talked like kind of like this, like quiet and slow. And something about that, like he was just very approachable, I suppose. And he'd give me compliments, but he'd also slide in like little bits of tips and some feedback on how I could train better. He'd be like, "Yeah, you're doing that overhead press pretty well. I can tell you're training hard, but have you ever considered like moving a little bit more like this or doing this instead?" And I would pick up on what he'd share with me, and it really helped. And because he was so approachable and also someone that I looked up to, I actually took his advice to heart, and that really helped. He also gave me his what do you call it? The New Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, that old Schwarzenegger book. He gave me his copy. He was just because he's a nice guy. But yeah, he really had a positive impact on me, and I learned a little bit about how to train better. He wasn't a personal trainer, not a fitness coach. He wasn't like a world class expert, but he knew enough to help me get a decent enough foundation. So
That's awesome, man. Like it's always funny how usually the biggest guys, like though they may look like mean or like they're usually like the softest, like most genuine, most nice individual that, but they're just giants, right? So no, that's very cool, man. When it comes to like nutrition back then, like I know for me as a kid, like my nutrition wasn't the best as a kid, especially with the protein. I'd just be curious about yours, like when you were growing up, when you started lifting, when did you get more serious with your nutrition, maybe looking at macros or, yeah, if you want to go into that.
sure. When I was a teen, I didn't know anything about nutrition outside of I think protein is important for building muscle. So I didn't really do anything outside of eating what was cooked for dinner that my family had prepared. And my lunches, thinking back in high school, like, I had the money that I saved up from working in the summers that I'd spend on my lunches and like the deli next and the store next door. And they weren't great lunches. Like I wasn't focusing on protein. There's probably a little bit, but not very much in the old deli sandwiches they had and that sort of thing. Tried to get protein in my breakfast, but yeah, it was. I knew protein was good. I knew I actually I didn't know what calories were, but I knew food probably was going to drive my muscle growth progress. So, but I didn't think much about it. I think in retrospect, I am fortunate in that my family had good structured meals. Like when it was cooked, like there was always like a protein source in the family meals that we had, and I would eat a lot of it. And like I'm thinking of like my mom growing up, she always encouraged us to eat like a lot of protein. Like make sure you eat the meat that's cooked for you. Like so I think that was good. I was also a big eater. Like I got a high food drive. So I've always been someone that's like had to stop myself from overeating. I haven't been the other way around where it's like got to get myself to eat or I forget to eat. It's like I gotta stop eating at some point. So I think in retrospect that was probably helpful because I was so fixated on lifting weights. And I was training really, really hard, even though it wasn't, I wasn't perfect at it, that's for sure. I think it was good that I had a high food drive because it helped me build muscle at the end of the day, even though I wasn't the leanest. But I learned more about calories and macros and kind of the basic foundational principles of fat loss and muscle growth, how that works with nutrition, probably in my earlier 20s. I want to say in probably the latter years of university.
Nice, man. What with is that when you started to get more involved with bodybuilding, or what was kind of the point in time where like something like triggered you to want to compete?
When it comes to competing, the seed was first planted in my head, I think in my last year of university. So at that point, I I'm not sure how old I was. I was in university for a long time, for 7 years, so it would have been my seventh year. I'd been lifting since I was 12, so I think I'd already been lifting for at least 10 years, almost 10 years by that point. So I had a decent amount of muscle on my frame, but I never thought about competing or even what competing really was. I thought about like Schwarzenegger and those guys in my old modern encyclopedia of new bodybuilding, new encyclopedia of modern bodybuilding. I get the name mixed up. But I never really thought about competing myself or really what competing was until I have a pretty distinct memory of working out. I had a training session in my last year of university, and there was a personal trainer working at the gym that I was working out at. It was a Good Life Fitness, and he asked me, he's like, "Hey, you got a great physique. Are you competing? Have you ever thought about competing?" And I was like, "What's competing?" But that was what initially planted the seed, and then I can't remember what I did next, if I like looked it up or if I what my next step was, but that's the memory I have is he asked me once or twice like, "Hey, you should consider doing it." I was like, "Well, that's a big compliment." I took it to heart, and that seed grew, I guess. And then the next year when I graduated from university, I worked as an in-person personal trainer. And when I was doing that, that's when the desire really grew because I was around fit people all the time. The other personal trainers, there's some of them that were in amazing shape that I looked up to, and they were competing, and I was learning more from them. And I was at that point looking more of this whole competition thing up online on YouTube, and I started to get really interested in it. I thought like, hey, why not? I mean, I love training. I know up to that point, I just wanted to keep building more muscle. I knew I wanted to keep building more muscle. So why not just have this really focused goal where I get to like do the thing that I love and just focus it on this one thing. So I ended up taking the plunge and deciding to do a prep, and that would have been 2018 or 2019. Yeah, so I went for it, but that's how the seed planted. Someone said, "Hey, you should compete, or do you compete?" And it grew from there.
So,
Nice.
so you say
How
your first season. So basically your first ever bodybuilding show was 2018, 2019. What was that like? And what kind of category were you part at?
Well, the prep itself was, in retrospect, I think in the standards of if I were to look at all of the preps that I did, it was the easiest prep that I did. Looking at it now, it was the shortest. I didn't get as nearly as lean as like say the last prep I did. But it was hard in its own sense in that it was the first one I ever did. So, and it was the leanest I'd ever been in my life up to that point. So it was, even though it wasn't the leanest I'd ever been, it was a shock to my system at that point. Even though it wasn't the longest prep I'd ever done, even close to the longest prep I'd ever done, it was still a shock to the system, more or less. I experienced all those kind of prep feelings for the first time that you you don't know what they're like until you feel them. So not just like that strange hunger focus, food focus that eventually sets in, or you know the feelings that come with hunger, but also like the emotional kind of disturbances and the changes that go on that I had no idea. Like I needed to look back on that in retrospect to be like, wow, that was something. And so in that sense, it was tough, but I I feel like for me, like my personality is very built to prep for like that particular kind of challenge. I like repetition and I like grinding. So I mean, we're bodybuilders, we like doing reps. So like that's my personality. So I felt like I was doing something that I was kind of designed for. from that psychological kind of a standpoint. So even though it was tough, like I liked that kind of a challenge. And I also found it really rewarding, like going from week to week and seeing myself get leaner. That was really cool to get to see that kind of relatively immediate feedback. And as far as like performance goals go, like like how I expected to do on the show today itself, I had no expectations really. I wasn't sure if I was going to come first, second, third, fourth, fifth. I didn't know anything about it. Never done a show in my life. I'd never been to a show in my life. So no expectations. I was an open book. I was kind of just going into it like, hey, we'll see what happens, which is like actually a beautiful thing. I was such a blank slate, no expectations. That was actually a special thing. That it's never been the same since then. But it was good. And it was a CPA shows, and it was called the what was it? The Natural Can Fit Pro. It was in Toronto. That's where I was living in the time. It was like under the what do you call it? The CN Tower. There's a huge convention center around that area. They held it there. It's this big, ginormous fitness expo, kind of right in the middle of it. And I competed. There's a really small class. There was and it was classic physique. I was one of four competitors in my weight class or in my height. It was in height, not weight. That was how they divided the classes, I think. And I ended up winning my class, which was, when you're not expecting, you have no expectations going into a show and you end up coming first. It was a pretty cool feeling. I'm not gonna lie, like I was pretty over the moon. I didn't really understand what I'd just done or anything like that. And I didn't win the overall. It was just me and another guy, and he was the guy. You could tell it wasn't his first rodeo for sure. He was significantly leaner, way better conditioned than I was. I had a good amount of muscle, which was helpful. But that other guy, his conditioning, he had a ton of muscle and he was very, very, very conditioned. So he definitely deserved the win on that. But I was just over the moon that I won. I got a gold medal. I won my class, and that was the coolest thing in the world. And that really drove my desire to keep doing it after that point, because winning was something that showed me that, hey, I think I have some potential with this whole natural bodybuilding thing. I loved lifting weights. I loved lifting weights before I loved the idea of competitive bodybuilding, but this was the idea. This kind of fed the motivation or fed my drive, my future drive to keep competing, because it showed me that I had potential, and I ended up really enjoying being on the stage. And yeah, that was the experience.
That's awesome, man. That's huge, first show ever, and then taking the first place, man. Like that's very impressive. How like you mentioned like that was one of like the big things that kept you going, like in terms of you knowing that you have potential in this sport. Do you think, like looking back at it now, like if you were say to come fifth in like that show, do you think you would still be competing in bodybuilding, or like what are your thoughts around that?
Oof, that's a good question. What would I have done if I placed lower? Honestly, I'm not sure. I think it could have gone either way. I think the answer that I'm leaning towards is something like if I came like last, then a part of me would have wanted to do it again just to show myself that I could be better. I think that could have happened. But I'm not sure if I came last and I was super discouraged from it. I'm not sure what I would have done. I suspect I would have wanted to come back and try again. Man, I guess it's one of those things where the only way I'd know for sure is that I would have to be in that situation to know. I did have a my third prep or my third show I did. I That was one of the hardest experiences that I had. It was a larger lineup. I think there was like 12 or 13. In my height, it was another CPA show. It was a natural Van City showdown in Vancouver. It
Nice.
wasn't a WNBF show, it was a CPA show. And I did not do as well as I had hoped for, and that was up to that point. That was the hardest prep I had ever done for several reasons, and I didn't do as well as I'd hoped. I came like fourth or fifth. I was top five. I didn't get a first, second, or third medal, but I know it was top five because I came out on that first call out. So it wasn't that bad at a 12 or 13 competitors. It was actually quite good. But I was really disappointed in myself because I felt I peaked really poorly. I did some weird stuff with my diet the days leading up to it, and I really beat myself up over that. That was a really, really tough one. I needed a little bit of mental recharge from that, but the feeling that I got afterwards ultimately was I want to do this again so I can show myself that I can be better and do better, have a better end result. And it wasn't just about getting a first, second, or third medal. It was about looking better because I felt like the what I showed on stage was a very poor representation of what I had been working for. So I kind of want it to reverse that the next time I prepped.
Yeah, makes sense, man. Yeah, the reason I asked that is just because I see it happen quite a bit with some people who do one show and they don't place too well and they get discouraged and they never want to do it again. So like even for me, like when I did my first show, I was like, I don't know what I would have done if I wouldn't have placed as well as I did because that was that initial driver for me to keep going. But over time with bodybuilding, like you just learn to really love that process. So yeah, I was just curious to your thoughts on that. But now, like fast forwarding forward to like, because you're competing next year, and I'm just curious on like how much has your preps changed from the course of like your first competition prep to all the way to like what you're potentially going to be doing for this last one.
They've changed a lot. So the first prep that I did, as far as like the logistics go, it was a very short prep. It was like 12 weeks, which was kind of, that's like the traditional bodybuilding length, 12 to 16 week long prep. I had a coach for that one. But it was like we just kind of started the prep at 12 weeks out because I was on his wait list and it was like, hey, I'm off the wait list and we're 12 weeks out, so that's when we're starting the prep. I knew nothing about it, so I was like, okay, 12 weeks, that sounds like a long time. Let's do it. Um, but yeah, so the duration was significantly less than it is now. So that's a big one. My mindset is way different. My approach to hunger and food is significantly different. So the first several seasons was, I'm fighting hunger. I'm fighting it. I'm finding all these different hacks and ways to try to mitigate my hunger levels. The first prep was kind of messy too. I was kind of unintentionally cheating on my diet in that and this was just out of ignorance. This wasn't out of like, oh, I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing. It was an ignorance thing where I was like eating extra vegetables that I was like, there's not really any calories in these vegetables. The amount of calories that I was eating from the extra vegetables that I was eating, there was a lot of calories that I was taking in, and it was leaving me bloated and extra uncomfortable from the extra vegetables I was using to cheat with. Um, but I was fighting those kind of emotions and those feelings significantly more for like that first prep, for example, than let's say this prep or my last prep. I feel like I have a lot more control and mastery over embracing the feeling of hunger rather than fighting it and not trying to eat too much volume or too high of a volume of food. The third prep that I did was probably the peak of how that could go wrong for me was I was fighting hunger so much for the third prep that I did that it left me just it made the process so much more difficult, bloated all the time, and the hunger was still there. So it's like this weird feeling where I was like super lean, I was eating a ton, I was bloated, but I still wanted to keep eating. I was really uncomfortable. I was still thinking about it all the time. I was thinking about all these weird flavors. So yeah, I think embracing the hunger instead of fighting it now is something that's been a big change for me. Also having more control over my the mental things that I'm feeling, the emotional things that I'm feeling, have way better control over that now. I think that's just come with experience, having done it multiple times at this point. And what else? As far as like training goes, that's something that's changed pretty significantly. My first three preps, I was training 7 days a week. I
Gotcha.
love training. So honestly, I could still train 7 days a week. I love being in the gym. It's my favorite thing. But those first three preps, training 7 days a week, it was the same kind of split that I'm doing now, a full body training split, but the frequency was higher. More overall weekly sets, more overall weekly training sessions. Still training as hard as I possibly could, but just high, very high frequency and overall pretty high set volume over the course of the week. And now I'm training at this point in this prep, I'm training 4 days a week, which actually takes a little bit of self-control for me not to train 5 or 6 days. But it's come with only good training a little bit less, and I've learned how to train pretty efficiently. So I think that's come with experience is the skill of lifting more efficiently, training really hard with the fewer sets and the fewer training sessions that I am doing during the week. I think it's leaving my body feeling less beat up overall. It is helping me from a psychological standpoint. Started doing that in my last prep actually in 2023. But yeah, those are the first differences that come to mind initially, anyways.
Makes sense. What did you notice any change in appetite from training 7 days a week to going to four? Like, did you notice like that coming down from not having as much fatigue, or did you notice it being about the same? What did that look like for you?
Surprisingly, I I haven't noticed much of a change. I
Yeah.
think I think my personality, ever since I can remember, I've got a high food drive. So whether I'm like bulking or in a maintenance phase or dieting for fat loss in a prep, I'm always hungry. I can always keep eating more. And that goes for training versus rest days overall. And actually, you know what's funny now that I'm thinking about it, I often find that on the days where I don't train, I'm almost more hungry than the days that I do train. I think it's kind of nice in that the way that I structure my days is that when I do train, I plant my training session right in the middle of the day after I've had like in between meals. And from my understanding, like if you're training really hard, you aren't likely to be thinking about food as much if you're training really hard. Training's a stressor. Cortisol is released as a byproduct of that. One of the effects that cortisol has when it's secreted is it suppresses appetite when it's secreted in spikes acutely. So it actually keeps me not thinking about food when I do have my training sessions on those days, but then the days that I don't have my training sessions, I've got a big empty space of time. And also that empty space is filled not with the training session where I wouldn't be thinking about food. So I think that might play a role in why I might actually feel a little bit more hungry on the days where I don't train, which might be counterintuitive to what you might think.
Yeah. That makes sense, man. Because I know like even when I train, like I sometimes just almost feel nauseous just from like training so hard. So like when you're feeling like slightly nauseous, like you're not gonna feel like eating food. So it totally makes sense, man. when it comes to like the post show period, like since you have such a high food drive naturally, do you find that post show period like even more extreme for yourself? Like, have you had a quite a difficult time with that recovery phase post show, or have you found ways to reduce the amount of weight gain post show?
Um, I have gained a. That's a good question. I've binged pretty hard after every show, or every competition season I've done. After I think the best job I did at delaying the rapid weight gain was after my first competition. In retrospect, I think that was because I didn't get as lean, so I wasn't hurting as much, whether I realized it or not, from just I mean, I was dieted for 12 weeks, but I was like 12 or 13 pounds heavier than I was in my last season. So I was just, I had more fat on my body. Like I wasn't hurting as much for that reason. But what I ended up doing for that first season was I just kept eating my regular prep meals, but I just added more food, like what we probably should do, like added like 300 to 500 more calories. And, it felt fine. I still had like a desire to keep eating, but it felt fine. I didn't weigh myself after that. So I'm not sure what my weight gain trajectory was like at all. But I did eventually binge and gain back like 10 extra pounds quite quickly within a very short period of time. And that was the memory I have was I went on a trip to Vegas. It was my first time in Vegas. It was just my dad and I. We flew down there, met up for a couple days, and we went to an all-you-can-eat restaurant. And oh man, that was probably the most I ever ate in my life. And I didn't know I had never experienced that kind of excess eating in a single session, I think, in a single meal. But I remember that was our lunch. I ate to the point of like food baby is an understatement. I was so bloated that it was just ridiculous. And we had to keep walking for the rest of the day. Like we had stuff planned to do for the rest of the day. And I remember being in so much pain, like walking around with my dad, but I was also trying to hide it. Like I didn't want to let my dad know that I was like, he didn't know I felt like I was dying. He's like, oh, my son, he eats a lot. It's like not a big deal. But like, I was dying. So that was tough. But yeah, for all of the other shows, like I gained weight back pretty rapidly for each of them. The next day, the following day, I'd really, really get after the food. Probably more than 10,000 calorie days, probably more than that in retrospect. And then I would eat for weeks after lots of calories, gain weight back very quickly. From a psychological standpoint, my personality, I don't struggle a lot with like losing the lines, losing the definition, losing the tone. I guess a little bit it's like, oh, it kind of sucks. It's not there anymore. But usually I get to the end of the season, the diet that I'm like, I just don't really, I'm cool with gaining back body fat. I don't care. I'll like put on my like a long sleeve shirt, sweater, sweatpants, and like I'm cool with just like being comfortable again, as far as like being able to eat a little bit more. And then focus more on training. Like I can focus my energy and my next set of goals on like just having good training sessions and getting stronger again. So from a psychological standpoint, that's been okay. And yeah, it's not like optimal the way that I've done it. That's for sure. Or at least I think it's not optimal, like gaining weight back so quickly after each season. After each season. But I think overall it's been okay. It's just I ended up getting to a healthy body fat percentage. I just get there maybe faster than most people do, and then my training sessions end up going better, maybe faster than if I were to like slowly reverse up. So yeah, there's definitely room for critique as to like the rate in which I gained weight, but at the end of the day, I ended up getting to a healthy body fat percentage, and my training gets better faster. So maybe it's okay.
Yeah. I do think for like from just coaching clients experience too, like yeah, there's certain individuals where it's almost better just to be a bit more aggressive with the weight gain push show. I find for a lot of people, it's just the mental aspect of like seeing that happen can sometimes be harsh. Like it's awesome to hear that like it wasn't much of a battle for you mentally to do that. How long did it take to like start to get to the point of feeling normal with your appetite after? Or do you find you still, even if it's 6 months later, like you still have appetite where you still want to eat more than what you're consuming, or does that calm down completely, like, to a point where you're eating at a level where you're like, okay, like I'm very comfortable with the amount of food I'm eating?
For the first couple preps I did, because I didn't get as lean, I think I didn't like I recovered in that element in that aspect more quickly. So it didn't take as long. Once I gained back that had that initial weight gain spike happen, it didn't take as long for me to feel like my appetite levels were kind of back to normal and my energy levels were kind of back to normal. And this is thinking back years now, so I can't remember for sure, but in hindsight, that's what I think happened. My last couple of seasons, though, it took longer. It was harder. So my last season, the prep was that was the longest prep I'd done at that point. It was like 11 months total, and I it was the leanest I'd ever got. Um, it probably took me that one probably took at least 6 months before I felt like I was completely okay as far as like normal appetite levels go, not as much food focus. My energy was fine within a month probably overall, just because I gained weight back rapidly. I had the energy stores on my body, like so from like a physical energy standpoint, I think that came back relatively quick. My strength came back relatively quick. I remember thinking like, wow, I'm like my bench press has gone up pretty quick, and it's only been about 4 weeks since prep, and I was pretty pumped on that. But psychologically and appetite wise, it took a long time. That one was probably I remember thinking 6 months after that show, like, wow, I still don't feel like 100% normal.
Gotcha. Do you think that was just due to the length of the prep itself and like being like getting to the level leanness that you got to and being trying to hold it for that longer? Because like when you for that last prep that you did, like were you continuing to diet down throughout the whole thing, or were you like getting to a point where you're starting to feed back up or like holding? What was that kind of looking like for you?
The I started to eat back up only 3 weeks from the end. So it was between my second last and my last show. We started to eat up a little bit, and it wasn't a lot. It was like we added an extra like 25 carbs or something like it was maybe it was more than that. It was like 200 calories worth of carbohydrates, something like that. So it was like a relatively small in reverse, I suppose, going from that second last to last show. So the vast majority of the prep was fat loss. I didn't do a maintenance phase or anything like that. It was my this was my first time working with Jeff Alberts too. So it was like from a coaching standpoint, I think he needed to get an understanding of like of my physique, like what how lean we didn't know how lean I needed to get to actually um, be really competitive on the stage. So I think part of the prep was like him learning my physique and what my limits were, and also me learning more about my physique and what my limits were and exactly how lean I needed to be. So, anyways, the way we pace it, it was pretty much fat loss through the entire 11 months. There were some periods where it was definitely easier, where like I remember there was probably a few months where I had 3 refeed weeks, 3 days a week. I had refeeds or high days. So that was like, it made fat loss dieting not very invasive doing that for months. And I think that was because we were kind of getting this understanding like, okay, maybe we don't need to push as much. But overall, I was still in a deficit. I was still losing weight within those weeks or within those months of having the three high days. But yeah, to answer your question, I think that yes, one of the main reasons that I felt like my appetite was impacted or it didn't go back to my baseline normal levels after the final show ended was because the prep was so long. I think that was definitely a part of it.
Makes sense. I guess yeah, like when you're in it for that long, hormones are just gonna continue to trend downwards. So yeah, makes sense, man. With how like your last prep went and everything like that, what are you guys planning for your season next year? Like, are there some main points that you guys are switching up or doing something different? If you could go into that, that'd be great, man.
Sure. Well, it's going to be another long prep. I like the long preps. Like Jeff sold me on that on the last one. Like it was long and it was tough, but it was nice because I didn't have to be as assertive and like those periods where like you're adding in extra cardio or you're dieting like super super hard where it really feels invasive. I even though the prep like the last prep I did it was longer, it was overall it was just because it was less invasive, it felt a little bit it left me feeling more fresh. Um, and also I got the leanest I'd ever been up to that point. So I had the best stage look. So I think it just works better overall. So I'm totally convinced of that. So it's another long prep. It's actually a little bit longer this time around. So I think it's about 11 months from start from the start of the first part of the prep until the first show. And then I'll compete for somewhere between 1 to 2 months. I'll do like 3 or 4 shows within a slightly smaller window of time than the last time around, I think. So the prep itself is going to be a little bit longer than, say, the last one. Not a ton longer, but a little bit longer. We are also because Jeff knows my physique a little bit better, he knows my personality better, and because we've been working together for longer, were very strategic, or we were more strategic about like planning my weight for the start of the prep, and like he helped me through my whole improvement season and made sure like I didn't get too heavy because that's my tendency. I have a high food drive. Like if I'm left to my own devices, I'd be heavier than I should be. So we made sure that I was a certain weight when I got started. And I actually started my like pre-prep diet 10 weeks ago, so I'm dieting right now. Um, but yeah, so the prep's a little bit longer because we have a little bit more time. We're gonna plug a maintenance block in the middle of it between my pre-prep diet and the prep diet afterwards. So the maintenance block, I think it's tentatively gonna be like somewhere between 4 to 8 weeks long. Um, So that'll be new. I didn't do a maintenance block in my last one, which I'm already kind of looking forward to the maintenance block. I've been dieting for 10 weeks. It doesn't feel super invasive or anything, but like you know how it feels dieting for a while and like from a psychological standpoint, it's like, I could eat a little bit more and like my body feels okay. I feel pretty good. I'm feeling good about like looking tighter from week to week, but I could eat a little bit more. So I'm kind of already looking forward to a maintenance block a little bit. So I'm excited about that. I think that'll help me recharge my batteries and both physically and psychologically before starting the latter part of the prep diet. And then yeah, I'll do the prep diet. That'll be I can't remember how long, like 4 to 6 months in there. It's 5 to 6 months, and yeah, the goal is same as the last season, the other seasons, to see if I can do better than I have ever before, get a little bit more condition than I have in the past. I am really excited and hopeful that I will see some improvements on my physique. During my improvement season, I was really kind of focused on bringing up some of my weaker areas. So I'm really excited to see if the extra attention that I gave my weaker areas during the improvement season, it shows on my stage lean physique. I'm really fingers crossed that shows. And yeah, so I guess to answer that question, some of the big changes would be perhaps a little bit longer. Got a maintenance block in the middle. It's going to be even less invasive than the last one was. Goals are to see a better physique than I'd ever seen before, than I've ever seen before. Hopefully, I'll get to see some of the improvements that I've been really focusing on, especially in the improvement season. Um, but yeah, I think
What are
Nice.
the some of the maybe specifics of uh, either body parts or condition on places that you say quote unquote improvements?
as far as muscle growth goes, my weak body parts that we found for my last season were my delts and like my mid upper back muscles, like my traps, especially. Is like I think my lats are pretty wide, which is no surprise because I've been like so fixated on like pull-ups and pull-downs ever since I first started lifting, like kind of obsessed. I thought like building a back was all about the lats, so I would focus on that. And I kind of neglected my traps, like the rowing movements. I would do them because it was like, well, I'm doing them because you should probably have a row, but I was just like, I can't really feel my lats as much when I'm doing a row, so I don't like them as much. So it's no surprise that my lat or my traps were are considered are probably they are warranted to have been considered a weak point. But building my traps, building my lats to focus on them, I have in my improvement season, I gave them a little bit more training volume, not a ton, but on average, maybe like 3 to 5 more sets per week to those body parts than my other body parts. The biggest difference, though, was the amount of focus I gave them and I am giving them with my training, like making sure my mind muscle connection is as good as it can be with my traps when I am doing rowing type movements. And same thing with my delts. I think it's been easy in the past for me doing like movements like lateral raises to just do them like going through the motions, like not really connecting very well with my delts when I do the lateral raises, sometimes like lifting too heavy, going through the motions, going to failure, but not really feeling my delts very well, getting to the end of the set and be like, well, I think it worked, but not really knowing for sure because I can't really feel my delts. Like I can't do another one, so I think it worked. But now it's just being really particular about making sure that for every movement that I'm doing for my delts and my traps that I'm spending that time efficiently. Good mind muscle connection, training them hard, moving with really good depth. So just being really efficient with training them. And then on top of that, a little bit, I've added a little bit more volume to them compared to my other body parts. As far as conditioning goes, I got pretty decent conditioning in my last season. That was the leanest I'd ever been up to that point. It got to the point where I don't think, from a psychological standpoint, I could have got any leaner. I know, Brandon, you asked earlier, like, was there a point where I ate up in that season? And I did start eating up when I was 3 weeks out towards the last competition. One of the reasons we started eating up is maybe I could have lost more body fat, but it was like I was so psychologically fried and hungry and food focused by that point that I don't know if like my psyche could have handled any more dieting. So I think I got pretty much as lean as I could have, but there was still at that point, like I was seeing striations, like especially on my right glute, like they were there, like you could see them. Awesome. My left glute, for whatever reason, stores a little bit more body fat than the right one. It's like, you know, gonna blame the genetics on that one at least a little bit. So shoot. So I'm hoping that for this time around, like I'm sure the striations are gonna show up on the right glute, but I'm gonna aim for them also a little bit more. They were there on the left glute the last time, but they weren't not as visible. This time, hopefully we can make them a little bit more equal. So as far as conditioning goes, just like get those last couple trouble spots of body fats. And I think that's in practice, that's just going to come from, well, maybe a couple things. So it losing more body fat. Maybe I got to lose another pound or two of body fat, maybe more than that. I don't know. And on the other one is things like mastering stress management, that sort of thing. I think that might help overall, whether it has some kind of an effect on fat loss or water retention or what have you to help really leave my physique looking tighter by the time I'm on stage. I think that kind of thing will be helpful. So self-mastery over stress management, working on that. That's something that I've been thinking about for a long time and that I've been working on. I think that's actually, I mean, I'm only 10 weeks into the pre-prep diet, but I feel like I have got a lot better control, still a work in progress, but a lot better control on that. And also sleep to an extent. I think if I can, I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. In my last prep, my sleep schedule was it was so bad. I was in the last part of the season of the prep, I would fall asleep on my couch. I'd finish the work day and then I'd eat my dinner. I'd watch something on Netflix while I'd eat my dinner. And then I'd fall asleep on my couch at like 7:15, 7:30, just pass out. Then I'd wake up at like 10 p.m., be like, drag myself to bed. My legs feel like they weigh 1,000,000 pounds. And then I'd fall asleep. So I had no trouble falling asleep, but then I'd wake up at 2 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning. So like my day would start at 2 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning. That was really tough psychologically. So I think what I'm going to do is I could use a little bit more sleep than that. So maybe make it a goal to see if I can sneak in an extra 30 to 60 minutes. But you know, when you're super, super lean, it's like the body gets you up. It's tough to get back to sleep after that point. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to force myself to not fall asleep at 7 or 7:30. I'm going to try to force myself to have like a real bedtime, not an infant bedtime.
I
Um,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I just have a side question that I wanted to ask. Just dialing back, remembering you saying that you competed in classic physique in both of the CPA shows previously, and just stalk through your last season, 2023, you did a bodybuilding. Now, there was probably a choice in between bodybuilding and classic physique. Now introducing classic physique into the WNBF now, I think last year or this year. I don't remember.
I was this year,
It
right?
was this year,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna get in trouble for this. But yeah, so this year we are introducing classic physique into WNBF. Would it interest you to take part in the classic physique division, or would you want to stick with bodybuilding?
I'm leaning towards just sticking with bodybuilding, I think. I don't know. I don't. I not sure how to fully articulate as to why that is, but I think it's like, okay, I decided my last season, and this is yeah, that would have been like right before they introduced classic physique, but I made the decision in my last season, like I want to go all in on this in the WNBF in bodybuilding. I kind of made that decision, and when they announced that they're doing classic physique, I was kind of confused. I was like, just thought like, should I compete in both? Like, should I consider doing one or the other? And at this point, I'm leaning towards just doing bodybuilding, seeing how far I can take that. But I haven't completely decided. I might do both.
Gotcha. Yeah, like I feel like bodybuilding and classic, like they're so close. Like there's still a lot of people, like well, you see it in the CPA all the time. Like I even in WNBF sometimes you'll see like the classic person also wins the bodybuilding, so it kind of gives you a second opportunity to potentially get that pro card. But yeah, like that's another thing I wanted to chat about too. Is I know we were chatting on your podcast a little bit there about the pro card. Like, what is that one of the big kind of goals of this season is to try to achieve that?
Yeah, material goals definitely. Like definitely doing it to win and to get a pro card for sure.
Gotcha.
It's not everything, but I'd be lying if I said it was definitely not at the top of my radar.
And then what's every show that you're doing this year? Do you have them all picked out so far, or is there like a couple that you're not sure about?
I've got two picked out so far, the first two. So I'm gonna do the WMBF Vancouver It's the first one I'm aiming for, and then the WMBF Kelowna. I live in Kelowna, so it's a local show, and I'd love to do a local show where I don't have to go to a hotel. Just have my own kitchen and my own bed and everything. So that'll be really nice. So the first two are picked. Not 100% sure about the next ones. I think I am going to try to do ones that are all like relatively close to where I live. The last season that I did, I went all over the place. I went to like Ontario, then California, then Alberta, then Washington State. So it was like kind of just like bouncing all over the place. And that was really, really tough, all the travel. So I think the idea of doing shows that are a little bit closer, where I can potentially, they're not much more than like a 6 or 7 hour drive away, I think that would be really nice. So, anyways, first two shows picked WMBF Vancouver, WMBF Kelowna, and then the third and possibly fourth show. I'm not sure yet. I'll decide a little closer, I think.
Nice, man. No, that'll be good. I'll be at the Kelowna show for sure. I know Adrian's going to be at the Vancouver since he's one of the promoters for that one. So yeah, man, looking forward to seeing you compete, man. It's gonna be a good season for you. I know it.
Thanks, Brandon. I'm excited.
We all are too. Yeah, because you have you have a really really great physique. But yeah, is there any other additional questions that
I,
you have?
I was just gonna ask one final
Yeah.
question, just about like what was like the most memorable moments so far with like competing in bodybuilding. What was like the one thing that every time you think about it, you're like, man, I was able to do that, or oh, this was like such a cool experience. Do you have one of those in mind?
I think I actually do. It was after my second show. So the show itself, it was a pretty good show. I came second, and it was during one of the COVID years, so like they didn't even know if they're gonna have the show, and like it was pretty fun. I was pretty happy with how I did, but what I really enjoyed was afterwards was being with my family. Like just it felt really rewarding. Like the season came to a close. I did pretty well. I felt like it was pretty fun being on the stage. But then just that was the natural Van City showdown in Vancouver. And I my mom was there, my grandparents were there, and my brother lives in Vancouver, so he was there. So it was just us. And so it's just, didn't have a ton of people there, but my closest family. And it was Thanksgiving that weekend. So what we did was immediately after the show, we got sushi together, which was nice. I didn't actually overeat yet. It was just like I had a normal meal, and it was good. I was really happy to be with my family. And then we just chilled at my brother's place. And Thanksgiving was the next day, but we just chilled at my brother's place. And it was just like my closest family. My brother had like a small studio apartment in Kitsilano, a really cool location in Vancouver. And yeah, just those couple days were really nice. We ended up preparing the Thanksgiving meal in my brother's really small studio apartment. There wasn't like a real kitchen or anything like that. It was like everything was all in one place. And that was just really nice, really close family. I felt relieved and happy about how the show went. And we had the Thanksgiving dinner. It was really nice. Definitely overate, definitely ate too much. But yeah, it's just being with family. And then I remember my mom drove herself and my grandparents home the day after Thanksgiving, but I stayed there an extra day just to chill with my brother. So I just hung out with my brother for that next day, and that was just a lot of fun. It was just one day of like no care in the world, could eat what I wanted, got to spend time with my brother. And yeah, I just remember like I had so much internal peace. That's what it was. It was just like such a peaceful weekend, no anxiety about anything, just spending time with family. And that was it. That's what comes to mind.
As,
It's always
as
cool how like the post show period, especially with family, and like it just they sound like everything just came together like perfectly for you on that day. So yeah, man, that's awesome to hear. Thanks again for being on the podcast. Um, Again, maybe share where listeners can follow you If it's there's, I think you're really doing a really good job on YouTube. But yeah, if you want to give them some of your links and stuff, yeah.
Sure. Well, on YouTube, I think my account's just Sam Kaplan. So you can subscribe to my YouTube account. I've got a fitness podcast, a natural bodybuilding podcast on there. I also share some of my own journey as well. In addition to YouTube, you can follow me on Instagram as well. My Instagram handle is at Jade Athletics. So I think those two places, YouTube, Instagram.
Yeah, we'll definitely put all those links in the description below, so you guys could find him easily. Now he is going to be competing, so please do follow his bodybuilding journey. We are all very, very hyped and very, very excited to see him and making all those new improvements on stage. We, wish the best of luck, and we look forward to all that. Now, before we close out, any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Oh boy. Words of wisdom. Um,
Just
if
anything.
there's something, if there's something that you want to work towards, then why not work towards it?
Love it.
That's it.
Love it. Love it.
Very good,
Okay.
man.
Then yeah, we'll close out this stories. So thanks guys for listening again. We'll see you guys next time.